Okay, so let me bring it back to where I started the last live stream, which is that um okay, so when I first started making these chatbots, I would like think of it in terms of like, okay, I'm making one chatbot. And so it's like, what does this one chatbot need to be able to do? And it's like, oh, it has functions. So I make each piece of code for each function and have a function calling thing. And it needs like a vector database, so I connect it to a vector database. And then it's like it needs certain aspects of it need to have structured outputs. So then I make structured outputs, blah 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 blah. But then once I started, um, once I got a little more proficient at it, and I was like, for example, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to a bar, and while I'm at the bar, I'm going to create a chatbot for this bar. Um, and then it was like I'm making lots of samples, many, many, many samples, and so I started to develop this. It's not like instead of a vertical method. How do I align my hands with the camera perfectly? So instead of like a vertical, that still looks messed up. So instead of like a vertical developing vertically, I would now I'm like sort of horizontal, doing a form of horizontal development, which is that all the files stay the same, and then it's just whatever the key difference is between this chatbot and that chatbot. That's just one file. The one file makes the whole difference from one chatbot to another. And then I can actually batch create chatbots. So if only that one file changes, I can create 10 of those files at the same time, each one customized to that specific business or to that chatbot or whatever. Um, and that's where I became. And then the key unlock there was like when I went from creating a new JSON schema for each chatbot to using as generic as possible of JSON schemas and putting all of the things that make that chatbot unique go into a text file. And the reason for that is because text files you can't destroy with one typo, but a JSON schema you can destroy with one typo. And you have to test it out on the OpenAI platform to make sure that it is compliant and that it works and everything. So once you get one that's working, it's best to just keep using that as much as possible and not be constantly editing the schema. Um, but you can constantly edit the text files as much as you want. So um, So the thing is, if I have code that generates these text files, that is fine. If I have code that generates a schema, that the once the schema is generated, I still have to go test it on the OpenAI platform. So just having generated it doesn't accomplish anything. So there's no way to really automate that process. I mean, there definitely is a way to automate that process, but and I'm sure most Python coders, that's like their primary thing is automating processes like that. But anyways, from where I'm approaching it, to automate that process would be much more complicated. And okay, even if you could automate it, even if I knew how to automate it, I don't know that it's a good idea to automate that. That's not, I mean, that's not the part that needs automating. What needs automating is the generation of these text files, which are system prompts, basically. Um, they're system prompts, and then they're the values for the variables of anything that you need to hold. And, and honestly, those could be in JSON because um, it doesn't have to be OpenAI spec compliant. That part of it doesn't have to be because it's not actually being sent in a structured output call. It's just being used as the system prompt. But why make it more fragile? Why not just keep it as a text file? LLMs are good at reading text files and figuring out what they are, and even if they have typos, doesn't matter. The formatting doesn't matter. Just explain. As long as it explains what it is supposed to do, that's all that matters. So I went from like thinking in terms of one chatbot at a time to now having this like sort of horizontal way of thinking where the vertical files, they all stay the same, and then it's just you can create an infinite number of variations on that type of chatbot. Um, and so I did that with the review bots, the Google review bots, which is of course the perfect case for, because it's such a simple thing and each one is going to perform roughly the same functions just for a different business. And then I did that for the web form bots. And then I realized that the FAQ bot, the web form bot, and can be an FAQ bot. There's no reason why I have to make any edits to the way that the web form bots operate in order to oh, fuck's sake. All right. Um, so right, the FAQ bots basically can use the exact same files as the um, web form bots. There's literally no difference. So from that point, um, I realized that all the previous types of bots that I have created, I should create the same process for. So that would include rag bots. In other words, that the if I want to make a new rag bot, all I have to do is uh, change one line of code. And that one line of code is just the vector database ID. And other than that, they all work exactly the same. Um, Now, if I want to have design differences, like a little different background, whatever, that's just based on the URL. Uh, but so I could, so I could make 100 different rag bots at a time, but I would need to make 100 different vector databases, which honestly that also can be automated. Like I could literally have a thing that like goes to 100 restaurants and grabs the menu and then creates 100 vector databases and uploads the menu to each of them, and then so I could just pop out 100 menu bots, for example. And then there's like the blog bots. So again, I should have it so that the files are all exactly the same. And the only thing that changes is like where is it getting its inputs from and where is it sending the outputs to. Other than that, everything is the same. And then the system prompt. But the system prompt file will hold like the URL where it's getting its inputs from and also the URL where it's sending the outputs to. And that means that in theory, I could, pump out 20 blog bots in one go. But I would need to have 20 feeds and 20 WordPress instances, or to send all 20 of them to the same WordPress instance, whatever. Or just skip WordPress entirely. So we've got the web form bots. We've got the FAQ bots. We've got the Google review bots. We've got RAG bots. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what am I forgetting? I feel like there's 6. Okay. Uh, uh, what did I have down here? Web form, FAQ, RAG, review, and blog. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're going with these 5 for now. There's definitely more I can add, and ultimately, like, the question is, how do I rework the sales bots so that they follow this like file structure? Because the sales bots are like crazy complicated because they determine um which part of the sales cycle we're in and use that to determine. I'm sure that I can like break it down into smaller pieces and then just have it swap between the smaller pieces, and everything will be a lot more efficient, and I would be able to create a full sales bot uh, using more or less the same sort of process that I do to create a review bot, which is like it's fully automated. Which doesn't mean it's going to be good. Like if I can create it fully automated, and then you still have to spend like to actually make it use it, you'd have like which is the same with the review bots. Like the review bots are not necessarily good. To make them good, I would have to consult with either an SEO company or the client and determine, are these really the SEO keywords that you're trying to go with? Is this the questions that you want the users to be asked? Like, are the reviews too similar? Like you're getting a lot of the reviews are all sounding the same, or does it sound too robotic? Like there's a million different things that we could do to, to improve it and test it and improve it and test it. But for the most part, all of these things are within the system prompt. So it's purely a matter of editing a text file. I could even have the client edit that text file themselves. And if they've been using ChatGPT on a regular basis, they wouldn't find that to be like an insanely complicated task. Or they might just, since they don't have to code, but they can just edit a text file and then test it, and then edit a text file and test it. They might actually just enjoy the process of having control and testing different things and seeing if it works the way they want it to work, or if they can get it to work the way they want it to work, or to try it first themselves before they tell me what it is that they're trying to do. Um, all right, that was quite a tangent there. Where was I? So for the web form bots right now, what I have is the ability to switch out the system prompt without changing the URL or leaving the chatbot in any way. You literally tell the chatbot that you want to change to a different chatbot, and it does. So there's no reason why that couldn't work where in the same way for like, are you talking to a web form chatbot or an FAQ bot or a rag bot or a review bot or a blog bot? There could be the switching mechanism. If it works there, it could work for any of them. So the next step for me is to adjust the file architecture to make that possible. Which truly the difference between these the web form bot and the review bot and the reg bot and the blog bot, the core difference is the schema. They each have a different schema, and they each have a different file, which is parsing the schema and doing different things with different parts of the schema. Anyways, so wow, little bit of a distraction there. Got a little bit hijacked. My brain got hijacked. I got triggered. Let's take a little break and come back. How about that? Okay. So when I talk about getting into code mode and then so I had to review all this context. This has been an hour, more than an hour of live streaming, just to get to the point of reviewing the context to the point where I can realize that this is the thing that I need to work on if I want to move things forward. This is the logical next step in what I'm doing. Um, and that doesn't actually tell me how to go about doing it. Doesn't even come close to telling me how to go about doing it. Um, so I could just start working on it without really, just start hacking away at stuff. Or I could spend more time getting more familiar with the context, identifying the key problem, the key variable, focusing on that, and then everything else will snap into place. Um, and obviously, if I'm high on weed, I have to go with the first approach. I have to just start doing things and then figure out why it's not working or whatever. Because if I attempt to think through it clearly, I'm not going to successfully think through it clearly. Uh, although I will say, like with all these, every time there's a coding problem, it's always a matter of like just breaking it down to the most minimal example of it working the way you want it to work. The most minimal example. So basically, what I need to do here, for example, is like take a web form, take my web form chatbots, and make it so that it can switch to a review bot in one case. All I need is one case of one web form chatbot being able to switch to a review bot, which means the review bot uses a different schema and it uses a different file to parse the response from the structured output. And other than that, every other file should be the same. And if I can successfully do that to swap to a review bot and swap back to a web form, then that means that I'm able to swap. I could follow the same process for swapping into blog bots, reg bots, and then I think I should be able to automate that process. So instead of you have to say to it like switch to ReviewBot, it just determines that what you're attempting to do is leave a Google review, and so that the most relevant one would be a ReviewBot. And ultimately, this is just I have just recreated function calling. This is the exact thing I was doing to begin with. But it is different, and the difference is that there's this horizontal, like if I can connect a web form bot and a review bot in one instance, that's great. But if I can mass produce web form bots and review bots, and I can also connect all of them in whatever way I want to, then that is totally different. I don't know if I'm explaining that clearly, but it does make perfect sense to me. So this task to move this thing forward is actually really simple. It's actually pretty simple. So all I have to do is go into the web form file and create a mechanism for it to switch the schema, the 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 file that parses the schema, or just a function that parses the schema, like the structured output parser, and what was the third part? Oh, and the system prompt, because I suppose ultimately I could potentially combine the system prompts. Like if this chatbot is supposed to have like a web form and a review bot, then like the information for the web form and the information for the review bot are both in the same system prompt, or at least in the same file. But we could do that later. So the only thing I need to do is go into the web forms, web form files, and make it so that it has the ability to swap to a review schema and a review structured output parsing file and a system prompt for a Google review. But that is actually it does bring up some questions. Like, for example, is the Google review system prompt and structured output parser and schema, do they exist in the directory which has all the files to mass produce these Google review bots? Or do they exist in a new directory? Because if they exist in a new directory, then I'm not actually connecting it to, I haven't, I still have to manually do all that. If it's outside of the directory, then I have to worry about networking issues basically. And um but anyways, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to I'm going to manually make a system prompt, and I'm going to manually make a schema, and I'm going to manually make that parser. And the key is the switching mechanism. If I can get the switching mechanism to operate properly, then I can automate that so that the user doesn't even know it's happening. And I can connect it to all these other problems are going to be possible, but that switching mechanism has to work. Otherwise, nothing else is going to work. Otherwise, yeah. And if the switching mechanism does work, then that means that these modules can be snapped together like Lego pieces. For the most part. So the question is, what is, what is the switching mechanism? And so the first thing that I should look at here is that switching mechanism that I already have, that I've demonstrated here, that, oops, I'm not even, Jesus. You know, this one right here that says like, or I can say support. And now I've switched to the support chatbot. And now I can say return to index. I think I could say return to default. And now I'm back to the index. And now, not Boyle, but Moody, Miss. Now we're in, now it's going to open up Ms. Moody's. And see, this is exactly what I'm talking about with the cost of context switching. Because if I was working on this one day after developing this switching mechanism, I would know exactly how it works. But I made this 3 weeks ago, and in the meanwhile, I worked 70 hours as a dishwasher, and I, you know, got into all sorts of various scenarios and blah blah blah. You know, started new relationships and ruined old relationships, and I have all sorts of things. So now I'm like, how does this work? I have no idea. I don't know how I did that. I have no idea how I did that. I don't know which file to look in to figure out how I did that. I don't know if it's all contained in one file or if there's little bits of this mechanism in multiple files. I don't know. I do know that I have all these files uploaded to ChatGPT and I can ask ChatGPT, but asking ChatGPT doesn't guarantee that the answer is going to be useful. It'll definitely sound useful, but it might be misleading. So it's almost better if I establish the context for myself before I start having that conversation with ChatGPT. So yeah, I have to figure out how that switching mechanism works. And honestly, here's the thing: even once I figure out how that switching mechanism works, it's not going to even it's not even going to go a significant way to solving this problem because this switching mechanism is more complex. I need to switch out a schema. I need to switch out a schema parser or like a structured output response parser. And then I need to switch out a system prompt. But the switching mechanism that I currently have just switches out the system prompt and nothing else. Motherfucking flies. There's a giant fly in here. Damn it. Dude, that fly is bigger than me. I need like the Little Shop of Horrors plant in this place in order to take care of that fly right there. So, first I need to figure out where the current switching mechanism is located. And by the way, yes, I would have this done. I would have already done this last night. I was making good progress. And then I went to the bathroom, and when I emerged from the bathroom, I was high on marijuana. Because apparently that's just what happens when I take a shit. So I need to find where the switching mechanism exists in these files. And then how do I expand on it so that it switches a schema and so that it switches the parser. Because right now all it switches is a system prompt. And my guess is the place in the code where it's executing the system prompt switch is not the right place to execute a schema switch and a parser switch. So if I try to just expand on it right there, it's not even going to work. So even after I understand how that works, I still have to figure out where this works and then how everything else is going to be affected by that. Like I might break the UI or yeah, I could break all sorts of things by attempting to create the switching mechanism, which is fine because I'm not, I'm not editing live code. It's not going to affect what's already up there and what's working properly. I'm not going to, but if when I edit the code and then it breaks another piece, then I have to figure out how to fix that. And if I don't figure out how to fix that, then the fact that I managed to get it to work at all doesn't actually mean anything. So that is a task before me, but at this point, I need to take a break. I need to go take a break. And when I get done taking a break, will I be in the state? Will I remember this context, or will I have to go through it all over again? Will I be in a state of mind for coding? Will I think, oh, you know what? I haven't been outside. I haven't talked to anybody today. I need, or like, I I need to take a shower. I haven't showered in a day. I better shower before my neighbor gets home because if I shower when my neighbor's home, then I will be high as fuck after I get out of the shower because all of his weed vape smoke goes into my bathroom. Um, and then somebody will call me, and then I'll feel like, oh, I should go talk to somebody somewhere or something. I got to go pick up a check. So, something could happen where I end up not working on this today. And if that happens, that I don't work on this today, which by the way, I haven't done any sales work today. I haven't done any marketing work today. I spent all this time just getting clear on what it is I'm even trying to do. But if I don't manage to work on it today, and then I get sidetracked by something else and something else and something else, and I try to come back to this 3 days from now, this 2 hours that I spent just identifying the problem, I'll have to redo. I'll have to start all over from that. I can't just jump straight to this point. It's not possible. I have to reestablish the context. Which is kind of crazy because honestly, establishing the context is the entirety of that's what chatbot development is. It's all about establishing the context. It's not about anything else other than establishing the context. So that shit wild.